nurses, where the turnover was just a massive problem, which is why they went to this. People rescinding their resignation letters. We have companies that tell us, after a year on this, they haven't had one what they call regrettable departure. They had so much trouble getting people. They would have to use agency staff. They would have to pay these big signing bonuses, and they saved like 750,000 pounds. So maybe over $800,000 in 1 year. One option is the employers lay people off, and the other option is they reduce work time and share that, give that free time back to people.
I want to talk about the 4-day work week. I obviously want to get into like the benefits, the data behind it. I think one of the best ways to kind of ground an idea as real, though, is to start with some of the pushbacks you might hear, the first kind of critiques that might come in people's head. I think the first one is like productivity. If people are working less, then they'll do less, and that'll make less money, so they'll get paid less, that kind of thing. So what does the actual research or data say about productivity with a 4-day work week?
The man who was most responsible for starting these trials did this at his own company. He calls it the 100-80-100 model. 100% of the money, 80% of the time, but 100% of the production, of the output. So mostly what happens is the companies get together either in teams, or if it's a small company, all together to figure out, where are they wasting time? Where could they save time? How could they improve efficiency? And so most of them will tell us that they have maintained their productivity or exceeded it. So for some of them, they actually, productivity is better. So we take other measures too. We ask for revenue, and that rises really nicely. We ask for absenteeism, we ask for quits. Mostly that 100-80-100 model is working. I would say there's a subset of companies where it's 100-80-80. They're not, these are the burnout places where they're doing this mostly because they just need to give people a break because the intensity of work is too high.
Yeah.
Healthcare, restaurants, and they make it work because they save a lot of money because people stop quitting, they stop getting sick, and so forth.
Yeah, and so the other part is, and you kind of went into it a little, is maybe more on the structure. And I know because of the companies that you had in these trials, it might vary, obviously, like you said, from like factories and such. But one of the first things people might think also is, if you're working less hours and you are doing similar productivity, well, isn't that like more work in less time? Maybe there's more stress, maybe like quality goes down because you're rushing or whatever. And I know you spoke to a little, the quality of like patients and things went up. How did you look into how companies kind of structure around that to get the productivity to stay there without that increased stress?
Oh yeah, and we also measure work intensity, which barely moves. So most of them do it because they had enough kind of dysfunctional cultural practices or business practices. So meetings are a big one. These are white collar workers mostly. We do have manufacturing and healthcare, restaurants, but mostly white collar, and they spend tons of time in meetings and lots of wasted time. And so they deal with that. So that just frees up time. The other big thing that a lot of them do is they create focus time so people can just put their heads down and work. People aren't interrupting them. Interruptions are one of the biggest obstacles to productivity. There's more chit chat, maybe. Sometimes, well, this they do say. Sometimes they'll shift from calling people to get things done to emailing or texting or slacking them, or just different ways to save time. And they might also, as one of my first interviews said, I'm not hanging out on Facebook anymore, or whatever it is that people might be doing. Because there is some of that in the workplace. People need that mental relaxation. They need that time off. And what's happening with the 4-day week is they're just getting so much more of it as a full day off that they feel they can have less of it during the 4 days they're there.
And some of those benefits that we see for workers, I want to ask about health first. I have a couple I want to ask you about individually. First, health, specifically, like burnout, I think is probably the big one people think about. Do we see benefits with things like that, like less stress, less fatigue, less burnout, these kinds of things?
Yeah, for sure. We have 20 different metrics of well-being, burnout being one of them, stress, fatigue, you named them all, physical and mental health,
Mhm.
affective, negative emotions, positive emotions, exercise, fatigue, sleep disorders, sleep amount, and then all the kind of work family conflicts, balance work life, and then 5 or 6 satisfaction measures. They all go up. The burnout, which you mentioned, is one of the more striking findings. Almost 68% of the people who do this score lower on the burnout scale, statistically significantly. Reduced stress, every single one of these, we get really great positive improvement. And it's not mostly intensity of work. So that inches up just a tad. Mostly it's just that people report being so much more on top of their work. They report their work ability is higher. They report, we have a work smart scale that goes up. So it's it's really a beneficial thing for people. And one of the most fascinating pieces of how that well-being improvement works out is we find that the more people say their workability has gone up, their productivity, which is what we're seeing. We're seeing a big jump in that. The more that actually is a key part of what affects their well-being. So feeling more on top of your job, feeling more competent at your job, it just gives you overall well-being too. So that was an unexpected result, but it's, we figured people were going to be better off with the 4-day week, but why? That's one of the big questions. And we also find not everybody takes the full 8 hours off,
Mhm.
but we find the people who have the biggest work time reduction, have the biggest well-being improvements.
It's crazy. It's almost like humans weren't meant to just work their entire lives away. It's kind of a crazy concept. But yeah, the next two questions I want to ask kind of tie to like things I talk to on my channel. So I'm not sure how much your research touches on them, but if it does, it'd be wonderful to get your insight. One is on AI. I think like AI with the workforce is a big concern for a lot of people. So with something like the 4-day work week restructuring, maybe how we look at labor, do you think this could help workers, especially those maybe most troubled by like AI coming into the workforce? Does it not really play a part? Does your research look into this at all?
There's sort of two things to AI. I mean, one is if AI is going to do a lot to save labor, and that is still a question because, there's sort of a whole counter narrative now that's saying, well, people have to spend so much time fixing bot sitting, they call it, fixing what these bots are doing. They're not really saving time. But if they are saving time, then the question is what happens? I mean, one option is the employers lay people off, and the other option is they reduce work time and share that, give that free time back to people.
Yeah, I was gonna say
Gotta
actually,
fight back. We gotta fight back against employer power. They have too much power right now.
totally, yeah, there's without a doubt. And I was gonna say I agree with you on AI. The least of my concerns with AI is actually kind of the economics of it all. It's definitely like the environmental stuff and then people's dependency on it with like their intelligence and research and stuff. But the other question that I had for you was actually kind of on climate change. That's like for me, that's the big issue politically. It's my number one issue. So I always ask people where I can fit it in. Like to me, it seems, if we're reducing the work week of these corporations or the hours they're doing this, maybe there could be potentially a reduction in carbon emissions. Was this something you looked into? Is there data to support that, or am I just crazy?
Oh no, you are by no means crazy. You are right on target. That is one of the big uh, sort of reasons that there's a whole constituency of people who are pushing the 4-day week for climate reasons. And that's actually something I have worked on since the 1990s. I
Nice.
published my first paper on that in 1991. So we did expect carbon reductions in carbon use with the 4-day week. And we have a number of questions in our surveys, and we've done interviews. And I literally last night just finished the proofreading for a new paper about this. When that happens, you usually see about, on average, maybe about a 15% reduction in commuting emissions. Now in the US, those are really high because so many people commute by car. So the more we get back into the workplace, the more that's going to come back online. But there's another piece to this, which is we didn't see what a lot of people are worried about with the 4-day week, which is what we call a travel rebound. Are people going to use those 3-day weekends and jet off to the Caribbean? That's around where I live, or Mexico if you live on the West Coast, or whatever. And the answer is no, no increase in that at all. So that, and no increase in second job holding, which might lead to more income and more carbon use. So basically, you'll get a bit of a commuting benefit based on how much on-site work you have, and then if you give people the time without any income reduction, that's pretty much the main thing you're going to get.
Yeah, and the kind of last question I had for you, and I think you touched on maybe parts of this throughout some of the other questions, but to put it all together, a lot of people hear things like this and maybe they'll think, it sounds great for the worker, but like it's really bad for the business. And obviously, as we talked about, productivity is going to be good for the business. But what are some of like the other benefits that you could see kind of from the business side? Like I think of things like maybe turnover being lower, like workplace incidents being lower. You're in the workplace less. If you're less stressed, maybe less accidents. Like were these kinds of things shown as well?
Definitely for turnover. I mean, we have some really incredible cases of people, like in the nurses, where the turnover was just a massive problem, which is why they went to this. People rescinding their resignation letters. We have companies that tell us, after a year on this, they haven't had one, what they call regrettable departure. They might be pushing some people out who they want to go, or other people are saying like, in a year, not one person left my team, and some of these are industries with like 30% turnover.
Oh, wow.
So the turnover benefits are really, really high. And also, it's easier to make new hires. One CEO I talked to about this said she had all these other friends who were also trying to hire in at their companies, and it was just a really bad time during the pandemic. They couldn't get people and so forth, and she's got hundreds of people applying to her company. So there's a really detailed study of a local government in the UK that was done by some of our collaborators, and they had a lot of they pay less than the private sector. They had so much trouble getting people. They would have to use agency staff. They would have to pay these big signing bonuses, and they saved like 750,000 pounds. So maybe over $800,000 in 1 year, when they went to the 4-day week, and pretty much all of their performance indicators went up or didn't fall. And so it's got lots of benefits, potential benefits for the employers. And I think maybe the number one statistics I'd throw out there is that we went back to our companies, and among those who had been on the 4-day week it was at least a year since they started, we found that only 10% had gone back to the 5-day week. So 90% found it. And this was a trial they were doing, it was a 6-month trial, but after a year, 90% are still on that 4-day week.